Good evening, dear friends, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Wherever you're listening from tonight, maybe tucked safely under the blankets, curled up in your favorite quiet corner of the house, or perhaps lying somewhere peaceful while the world slowly quiets down outside. I'm so happy you're here with me. Take a slow, gentle breath in. Let your shoulders soften and drop. Maybe pull the blanket or duvet up just a little higher and allow the day to quietly drift away. Monaco Harbor was the perfect stage for tragedy. Gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, the superyacht La Sirène floated like a jewel of Art Deco splendor, its polished decks hosting the elite in their finest roles. Then Sir Reginald Harrington, the shipping tycoon, was found dead in his opulent cabin, a glass of champagne spilled beside him. Foam at the lips, his eyes wide in eternal surprise, the police called it a heart attack from excess. But Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this floating theater of wealth and whispers was playing a role. The role of innocent, the role of murderer. The curtain rises. Sound effect. Distant yacht horn echoing over the harbor, followed by the soft pop of a champagne cork. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The superyacht. La Sirène rocked gently in Monaco harbor, its sleek Art Deco lines gleaming against the azure sea. Crystal chandeliers tinkled softly through open portholes, while the scent of Chanel perfume blended with salty Mediterranean air and faint Cuban cigar smoke. Polished mahogany railings shone under the sun, velvet curtains rustled in the breeze, and footsteps echoed on parquet decks as guests moved in elegant silence. In the master cabin, where Sir Reginald Harrington lay sprawled, a shattered crystal glass beside him. Champagne pooled on the floor, carrying a bitter undertone, perhaps the final taste on his lips. The grandfather clock chimed solemnly, marking the moment death had taken the stage. Lady Evelyn Harrington stood nearby, kid gloves clutching a handkerchief, performing the shocked widow with trembling voice. Mon Dieu, she whispered, eyes wide but dry. Hercule Poirot arrived, summoned by the victim's earlier telegram, hinting at business treachery. He tilted his egg-shaped head, green eyes scanning every detail. Warm sunlight streamed through portholes, clashing with the chill death had left. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The stage is set, mes amis. But this death, it is no natural curtain call. The performance is too theatrical. The cast gathered on the upper deck. Fresh hothouse roses perfumed the air. Crisp linen napkins lay beside silver coffee pots. Lady Evelyn dabbed dry eyes with silk, playing grief. Victor Langford, the partner, puffed a cigar, rough tweed masking loyalty. Isabella Rossi, the mistress, sipped icy champagne, crystal glass trembling, fear dressed as sorrow. Captain Marcus Thorne stood rigid, leather logbook in hand, the dutiful commander. Dr. Eleanor Voss adjusted her stethoscope, helpful and calm. Charles Harrington, the nephew, lounged against the rail, sandalwood cologne clashing with sea breeze, ambition behind nonchalance. Poirot made expressive gestures with small hands. Each of you plays a role, but one has scripted murder. The lounge fire crackled distantly, warming against evening chill. A rain began pattering on windows, a soft drumbeat. Watch carefully, mon ami. Is it truth or theatre? Poirot analyzed Lady Evelyn first. The performance. She weeps, handkerchief dabs eyes, shoulders shake. The tell. But the cloth stays dry, mascara perfect, grief too flawless. The psychology. I recall the Styles case. A woman rehearsed sobs in mirrors, timed pauses for effect. Yet her hands gripped too tight, knuckles white with relief, not sorrow. The body knows truth, even when the face lies. The truth. She knew of the death before announcement. Grief is costume here. You see it now, non? The mask slips. Did you catch Victor's steady gaze? Poirot smoothed an imaginary sleeve wrinkle. Piano music drifted faintly, melancholic and rehearsed. Strong coffee was served, bitter taste echoing suspicion. This one plays loyalty. But where is the shock in his eyes? Police called it heart attack from rich living. Poirot knew better. Wood smoke curled from the fire, hinting at hidden flames. Tension rises, he whispered. Someone will break soon. Doors closed softly below, each click a cue. Isabella's hand shook as she set down a glass, guilt or fear. Poirot arranged coffee cups symmetrically, mind-ordering facts. Cold marble deck contrasted warm salon air. Lilies released heady scent, cloying like false innocence. Ask yourself, why does she avoid the captain's eyes? The yacht was sealed. No one leaves the stage. Rain drummed harder, like applause for the dead. Distant champagne corks popped, jarring the sorrow. You watch with Poirot, no? See how posture stiffens? Charles laughed nervously, ice cracking. Too smooth. Truth stumbles, lies flow easy. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Night air chilled the terrace, leather seats creaking. The careful observer, you are becoming one, mon ami, notes the doctor's quick glance at the nephew. The stage was set. The actors had taken their places. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The morning sun turned Monaco harbor into molten gold, bathing La Sirène in warm light. The scent of strong continental coffee drifted from the galley, mingling with polished furniture wax and the faint trace of last night's Cuban cigars. Silk rustled as Lady Evelyn descended the grand staircase, resuming her role as hostess even with tragedy hanging over the yacht like a heavy curtain. Footsteps rang softly on parquet floors, guiding the cast towards the breakfast salon where crystal glasses gave delicate tinkles with every careful movement. Hercule Poirot began the formal interviews, treating each conversation as a carefully lit scene on his floating stage. Enter the players, one by one, he announced, drawing himself up to his full, still modest, height. The salon air felt pleasantly warm from sunlight and the low crackling fire in the grate. Victor Langford was called first. He sat heavily in a leather armchair, rough tweed jacket contrasting the smooth mahogany table. Reginald was my partner for 20 years, loyal through every storm, he declared, voice steady, cigar already lit between thick fingers. Poirot watched the performance unfold, hands too still, eyes never quite meeting, the dark stain of spilled champagne still visible on the carpet edge. This performance, it is rehearsed. Truth does not rehearse, mon ami. Velvet curtains swayed gently against cold marble columns. A chill lingered from the terrace doors left ajar overnight. Hot coffee steamed in fine porcelain cups, its bitter aroma sharpening every word. Observe, this suspect plays loyalty far too perfectly. Watch carefully. Is it truth or theatre? Lady Evelyn entered next, trailing the unmistakable cloud of Chanel number. 5 that seemed to announce her before she spoke. She dabbed at perfectly dry eyes with a silk handkerchief edged in lace, kid gloves soft against her cheek. He was my entire world, she murmured, voice breaking at exactly the right moment. Yet no tears fell. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed the quarter hour, a solemn punctuation to her practiced sorrow. Sweet liqueur was offered from a crystal decanter. Its cloying taste lingered on the tongue like an overacted line. The mask slips. Did you see it in that tiny, perfect pause? Poirot asked quietly, addressing the invisible audience. He adjusted his moustache with precision, thoughts falling neatly into place. Piano notes floated in from the distant lounge, slow, mournful, almost too appropriate. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how the handkerchief never quite touches real moisture. Isabella Rossi appeared in a whisper of pale silk, her gown catching light like water. I loved him, truly, deeply, she insisted, fingers tied around an icy champagne flute. The crystal was so cold it misted. Tiny beads of condensation rolled down like unshed tears she refused to shed. Her rose cologne battled with the sea salt breeze drifting through open portholes. But was this love performing, or terror dressed in lover's clothes? Ask yourself, Poirot murmured, why does this hand tremble only when she thinks no one watches? Captain Marcus Thorne stood like a sentinel, polished leather boots gleaming, logbook clasped under one arm like a shield. I never left the bridge between 10 and 2, he stated flatly, every word measured. Wood smoke from the fire curled lazily upward, blending with his faint sandalwood aftershave. The fire popped, sending sparks against the grate. This actor plays duty with admirable rigidity. But observe the eyes. Where is even a flicker of regret for a man he served so long? Dr. Helena Voss smoothed a crisp linen napkin across her lap, movements economical and controlled. Cardiac arrest, undoubtedly. Years of rich food, cigars, stress. Her helpful tone was almost soothing, too soothing. Fresh lilies in tall vases released their heavy perfume, almost masking the faint, bitter whiff of medicine that clung to her medical bag nearby. The door behind her closed with a soft, deliberate click. Consider the psychology, Poirot said gently. Why does this helpful physician defend her verdict with such certainty? Charles Harrington entered last, deliberately casual, tweed jacket open, sandalwood cologne sharp in the warm room. Uncle Reggie was practically a father to me, he said, with an easy half-smile that did not reach his eyes. Fresh hothouse roses stood in crystal vases on the sideboard, their sweetness suddenly cloying. His fingers drummed once, twice, on the arm of his chair before he caught himself. The careful observer, and you are becoming very careful, mon ami, will notice those hands never shake, not even a little. Contradictions appeared like missed cues in a dress rehearsal. Victor claimed he was alone in the smoking lounge. Isabella said she saw a shadow that might have been him near the master cabin at almost the same time. Captain Thorne's log entry was too neat, ink still slightly tacky, as though freshly written. Rain began again, soft battering on the glass, like fingers tapping for attention. Champagne was quietly poured, dry and sparkling, bubbles rising in perfect lines. Poirot's little grey cells turned busily. The piano music stopped suddenly, leaving an expectant silence. Ah, but you say Poirot sees drama where there is only coincidence. Bear with me a moment longer. Smooth crystal, rough tweed, soft kid leather, cold marble underfoot, warm firelight. All the textures of deception surrounded them. Now, Chapter 3, the first act. The investigation moved deeper into the yacht's private corridors and shadowed cabins, the true backstage of this floating theater. In Sir Reginald's study, the scent of furniture wax hung heavy, mingling with lingering traces of Cuban cigar smoke and the faint metallic bitterness of spilled medicine. Velvet curtains were drawn back to reveal cold marble floors, still damp from overnight condensation. Footsteps echoed hollowly as Hercule Poirot paced, his egg-shaped head tilted in concentration, green eyes darting from one detail to the next. The first real crack appeared during a second interview with Isabella Rossi. She sat on the edge of a silk-upholstered chair, fingers twisting the stem of an empty champagne flute. We argued, yes, bitterly, the night he died, she admitted at last. In her voice broke genuinely this time. Actual tears slid down her cheeks and darkened the silk of her handkerchief. The warm air of the drawing room pressed against her, yet she shivered as though reliving the chill of that final quarrel on the open deck. He threatened to cut me off completely. I was angry, but I swear I never. Her words dissolved into quiet sobs. Poirot observed the change with satisfaction. Bravo. At last, the performance shifts. Until this moment, it was too controlled, too perfect. Now we see something real. Rain tapped insistently against the portholes, a steady rhythm underscoring her confession. Hot coffee was brought in, its strong continental aroma cut through the cloying lilies arranged on the side table. The mask slips. Did you catch it, mon ami? Real emotion is never so tidy. A past case flickered in Poirot's mind. The infamous affair aboard the Orient Express. There, too, a group had rehearsed their roles with military precision, each passenger reciting the same carefully timed story, eyes deliberately averted, alibis interlocking like perfectly fitted scenery. Yet one small fracture appeared. A woman playing the part of the devastated traveler volunteered details too eagerly, her hands rock steady while claiming nervous shock. Poirot had watched her pour tea without a tremor and understood immediately. The body does not lie when the mind rehearses too much. Genuine distress disrupts fine motor control. Performed distress polishes it. That one steady hand among so many trembling ones had eventually unraveled the entire elaborate production. Psychology, always psychology, what reveals what words attempt to conceal. In quiet reflection, Poirot considered the deeper nature of masks, approximately 280 words. Every society is a stage, and every person an actor required to play acceptable parts. We wear grief to hide relief, loyalty to disguise resentment, innocence to veil experience. In this case, observe how Lady Evelyn's perfect widowhood conceals the quiet exhale of a woman finally released from years of quiet tyranny. Humans don masks not merely to deceive others, but to protect fragile inner selves from judgment. The weight of performance exhausts. That is why cracks eventually appear. I recall another matter, the Blue Train mystery, where a woman of great wealth disguised herself in rough tweed and plain shoes to play the part of genteel poverty. Yet her hands remained soft, her taste for dry champagne undiminished. Habits of privilege betray us long after the costume is changed. The universal truth is simple. Deception requires constant energy. Truth flows naturally. The actor tires, stumbles, forgets a line. The honest soul merely breathes. Theatrical wisdom. For you, careful observer, watch always. For the moment fatigue betrays the performer. The mask is heavy. Sooner or later, every player sets it down. Alibis began to fray like over-rehearsed dialogue. Victor Langford's claim of solitude in the smoking lounge was contradicted by a steward who had seen a man in tweed near the master cabin corridor around midnight. Crystal chandeliers swayed gently overhead, tinkling like warning bells. Captain Thorne's logbook entries, once so neat, now showed slight variations in ink density, some lines added later, perhaps, as the fire in the grate popped and sent a shower of sparks upward, briefly illuminating the faint sheen of nervous sweat on Dr. Voss's brow when questioned again about the exact contents of Reginald's last prescription. Charles Harrington attempted lightness, but his jests rang flatter now. "Really, must we go over this again?" he asked, yet his foot tapped an anxious rhythm against the leg of his chair. Fresh roses in crystal vases gave off an almost suffocating sweetness. "Ask yourself," Poirot murmured to the invisible audience. "Why does this young man laugh so often at the mention of poison?" Piano music drifted once more from the salon, slow, mournful, almost mocking. Doors closed softly along the corridor, each click tightening the invisible noose of suspicion. The night air creeping in from the terrace carried the clean or cold bite of the sea. "The tension rises," Poirot said softly. "Someone will break character very soon." Lady Evelyn's gloved hands trembled as she reached for her coffee cup, grief performing or guilt beginning to surface. The careful observer, and you are becoming very careful indeed, notes how her gaze flickers toward Victor for the briefest second before returning to the floor. The first act concluded. Some masks had cracked. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. The midday sun poured through the yacht's tall salon windows, turning crystal decanters into prisms of light across the polished mahogany table. The air carried the mingled scents of strong coffee, furniture wax, and the faint, persistent trace of Victor Langford's Cuban cigar. Silk rustled as Lady Evelyn moved restlessly between velvet armchairs, her kid gloves twisted together like pale, anxious creatures. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked with deliberate slowness, each chimes a small hammer striking at composure already fraying. Hercule Poirot increased the pressure, methodically testing each alibi as though turning the pages of a flawed script. "We return now to the night in question," he announced, his small hands making precise, expressive gestures. "Let us examine these lines. You have also carefully rehearsed." Victor Langford was summoned first. He sat with deliberate calm, tweed jacket unbuttoned, cigar smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. "I told you, I was in the smoking lounge until 1 o'clock, reading reports." His voice remained even, almost bored, but Poirot noted the way the man's thick fingers tapped once, twice, against the arm of the chair before he caught himself. "A most convenient solitude," Poirot observed mildly. Yet the steward, Pierre, recalls passing a gentleman in rough tweed near the corridor to Sir Reginald's cabin at 12:45. "The same tweed, monsieur, carries the same scent of fine Cuban tobacco." The terrace doors stood ajar. Cold sea air slipped in, brushing against the warmth of the crackling fire. "Your script, it has developed an unfortunate hole." Victor's jaw tightened, but he forced a chuckle. "Stewards can be mistaken or bribed." The denial came too quickly, too smoothly. Poirot merely tilted his egg-shaped head. Rehearsed lines often sound smooth, known. Truth, however, tends to stumble. Lady Evelyn was next. She stood near the window, a silhouette framed against the glittering harbor, Chanel perfume rising like an invisible curtain around her. "I retired early. Headache, you understand. I took a sleeping draught and heard nothing until morning." Her voice trembled on cue. She raised a gloved hand to her temple in a gesture almost theatrical. Poirot regarded her calmly. "Yet your maid reports that the bottle of sleeping draught on your dressing table was untouched that night, not a drop missing. Curious, is it not, for one suffering so severely? He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. Grief may be performed, madame, but insomnia is less cooperative. Her eyes flickered toward the doorway where Victor had just exited. The briefest glance, gone in an instant. The mask slipped. Did you catch it, mon ami? Isabella Rossi entered trembling, a silk gown whispering against marble. I was on deck, alone, thinking. She clutched an empty champagne flute so tightly the crystal seemed ready to crack. I swear I never went near his cabin after our argument. Poirot produced from an inner pocket a small folded letter. This was found tucked inside your jewel case. An impassioned note to Sir Reginald, dated 2 days before his death. If you leave me for her, I will make sure you regret it forever. Strong words for one who claims only sadness, not rage. Isabella's face drained of color. The flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the parquet with a sharp musical crash. It was anger, not murder, she whispered. Anger that hides poison is a very dangerous prop, Poirot replied softly. Fresh lilies in tall vases gave off their heavy sweetness, in almost choking in the suddenly still room. Captain Thorne's turn came. He stood ramrod straight, leather-bound logbook under one arm like a breastplate. My entries are accurate. I was on the bridge the entire watch. Poirot opened the log to a flagged page. The ink on the final 2 entries is darker, monsieur, fresher. Written after the fact, perhaps. And this small discrepancy. You note calm seas at midnight, yet the weather log ashore records a sudden squall at 11:40. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks dancing. Duty is an honorable role, Captain. Fabrication is less so. Thorne's Adam's apple moved once. Silence answered for him. Dr. Eleanor Voss maintained composure longest. The cause was cardiac arrest, aggravated by years of excess. My examination was thorough. Poirot placed a small brown bottle on the table. This prescription for digitalis, written by you 3 weeks ago. A medication that, in improper dosage, mimics or causes exactly the symptoms we observed. Foam at the lips, wide eyes, sudden collapse. He arranged 2 coffee cups symmetrically beside it. Helpfulness can be a mask, doctor. But masks slip when questions become too precise. Charles Harrington attempted levity to the last. Really, all this melodrama over poor old Uncle Reggie. He ate and drank himself to death, everyone knows it. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Yet your laughter, monsieur, comes a fraction too late each time poison is mentioned. And your hands, observe, they remain perfectly steady. A man truly shocked would tremble, known, even a little. The young man's smile faltered. Rain began again, soft fingers drumming on the glass, underscoring the growing strain in every voice. The drawing room felt smaller now, the air thicker with wood smoke, coffee, lilies, and unspoken fear. Crystal chandeliers tinkled overhead like distant warning bells. Doors closed softly along the corridor, one after another, each click tightening the invisible threads of suspicion. Rehearsed lines began to falter. The script was failing. Chapter 5. The Mask Slips. Late afternoon, light slanted through the tall windows of the main dining salon, turning crystal chandeliers into trembling constellations above the long mahogany table. The air was thick with the perfume of hothouse roses, the faint bitterness of cooling coffee, and the lingering wood smoke from the lounge fire. Silk gowns rustled uneasily. kid gloves were removed and laid aside like discarded props. Every suspect had been summoned when the stage was cleared for confrontation. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table, small hands clasped behind his back, green eyes gleaming with quiet certainty. Mesdames et messieurs, the time for private rehearsals is over. We come now to the moment when masks must fall, whether willingly or not. Isabella Rossi broke first. She rose abruptly, chair scraping harshly against the parquet. Her pale silk gown caught the light, like water disturbed. "Enough," she cried. "I cannot carry this any longer." Tears, real tears this time, spilled freely down her cheeks, darkening the silk at her collar. I put the digitalis in his champagne, yes, me. But it was not for money or revenge. It was love, twisted into something monstrous. Her voice cracked. He promised to leave her, to marry me. Then I saw the letters. Love letters to Evelyn. Still burning in his mind, even after all these years. I could not bear it. One extra dose, just enough to make him sleep forever. The room froze. A champagne flute slipped from Dr. Voss's fingers and shattered on the marble with a crystalline scream. Isabella collapsed back into her chair, shoulders heaving, the performance of tragic mistress finally giving way to raw, ugly grief. Poirot regarded her without surprise. "The mask has fallen, mademoiselle. Beneath it, the true face at last. Obsession performing as devotion, hate disguised as love. A very common tragedy in the theater of the heart." He turned slowly toward the others. The fire in the grate crackled, sending warmth against the sudden chill that seemed to settle over every shoulder. "Now we examine another performance," Poirot continued, voice calm and inexorable. "To Monsieur Charles Harrington." Charles lounged back in his chair, attempting the same easy half-smile that had served him so well until now. "Me? Come now, Poirot. This is absurd. I'm the grieving nephew, nothing more." The performance. He leans casually, one arm draped over the chair back, laughter ready on his lips. The posture relaxed, the tone light. The tell. But observe. The foot taps an irregular rhythm beneath the table. The fingers of his right hand curl and uncurl against the armrest. Too controlled, too deliberate. Genuine shock would ripple through the body like a stone dropped in still water. This calm is a rehearsed stillness. The psychology. I'm reminded of the Crooked House affair, where a clever young man played the part of the harmless fool so convincingly that even Scotland Yard dismissed him. He giggled at suspicions, made clumsy jokes, dropped things on purpose to seem awkward and unthreatening. Yet in unguarded moments, when he believed no one watched, his eyes sharpened like knives, calculating angles. Youth often dons the mask of stupidity to lower suspicion. Cunning hides best behind apparent dullness, but guilt sharpens the mind, does not dull it. The body betrays what the role attempts to conceal. Steady hands when pouring champagne for a dying man. No tremor of horror, only satisfaction. That is the psychology the little grey cells understand. The truth. You, Charles, were not the grieving heir. You were the architect. The digitalis came from Dr. Voss's stores, yes, but the hand that tipped the fatal extra measure was yours. You waited until Isabella's quarrel provided the perfect cover. Then you played the fool while planning to inherit everything. You see it now, mon ami. The mask of stupidity was your finest costume. Charles's smile vanished. The tapping foot stilled. For the first time, his eyes showed something raw. Fear dressed no longer as amusement, but naked and small. Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn. And you, madam, the dry-eyed widow. You knew of the plan, perhaps even encouraged it. The sleeping draught untouched in your cabin was no accident. You stayed awake to watch the final act unfold, relief performing as grief. A loveless marriage ended, a fortune secured. Evelyn's gloved hands clenched on the table edge. No denial came, only silence, and the soft, wet sound of Isabella still weeping. Captain Thorne stood suddenly, leather-bound logbook falling to the floor with a dull thud. I altered the entries to protect the schedule, but I never. His voice faltered, and the mask of the dutiful commander cracked like thin ice. Dr. Voss stared at her own hands, as though they belonged to someone else. The prescription was legitimate, but I suspected. I said nothing. I told myself it was only heart medicine. One by one, the performances splintered. The rain had stopped. Late sunlight poured golden across the salon, catching motes of dust that danced like tiny actors taking final bows. The grandfather clock chimed 5 times. Slow, solemn, final. Poirot drew himself up. The psychology, it is everything. We wear masks because truth is often too terrible to face naked, yet the body, weary of the performance, always betrays us. A trembling hand, a too steady gaze, a foot that taps when it should be still. These are the slips no actor can rehearse away. He made one small and expressive gesture toward the shattered flute on the floor. The mask has fallen. Beneath it, the true faces at last. The salon felt quiet, save for the distant lap of harbor water against the hull and the soft crackle of the dying fire. No one moved. No one spoke. The curtain between deception and revelation had been torn wide open. The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. Evening settled over Monaco harbor like a heavy velvet curtain drawn across the stage. The superyacht La Sirène lay quiet now, her decks empty except for the soft tread of police officers and the occasional creak of polished mahogany settling in the cooling air. Inside the lower corridors, the true backstage of this floating drama, Hercule Poirot moved with deliberate steps, small hands clasped behind him, and green eyes alert for what the performers had tried so hard to conceal. The first secret emerged from Sir Reginald's private study. Behind a false panel in the bookcase, discovered when Poirot noticed one volume of Shakespeare slightly askew, a small steel safe stood revealed. Inside lay not jewels, but documents, shipping manifests marked with coded entries, false bills of lading, and a ledger detailing payments to consultants in ports across the Mediterranean. The faint metallic scent of ink mingled with the lingering furniture wax and cigar smoke that clung to the room. These were not legitimate business records. They were the script of smuggling, art, antiquities, perhaps even rarer contraband, run through Harrington's fleet for years. Poirot arranged the papers symmetrically on the desk. Behind the curtain of legitimate shipping, are mon ami. We find the real play, greed costumed as commerce. Next came the hidden connections between the players. In Lady Evelyn's cabin, tucked inside the lining of a crocodile skin jewel case, Poirot found a packet of letters, passionate, unsigned, but written unmistakably in Victor Langford's bold hand. Phrases leaped from the page. When he is gone, we shall be free at last. Our life begins then. The paper carried the faint trace of his Cuban cigars. Love had not merely performed as loyalty. It had rehearsed murder. Captain Thorne's cabin yielded the next layer. Beneath the false bottom of his leather-bound logbook lay receipts, large, regular payments from an offshore account linked to Harrington's company. Thorne had not merely altered entries to cover a night's movements. He had been the silent enabler, he turning a blind eye to illicit cargo for a share of the profits. The leather felt rough and worn under Poirot's fingers, as though it had carried too many secrets for too long. Dr. Eleanor Voss's medical kit, when opened fully, revealed more than prescriptions. A small vial of digitalis concentrate, far stronger than needed for heart patients, had been carefully resealed, its label slightly smudged as though handled in haste. She had supplied the means, perhaps under blackmail, perhaps for money. Her helpful mask had hidden complicity. And Charles Harrington? In the false bottom of his traveling trunk, Poirot discovered a single sheet torn from the ledger, a note in Reginald's own hand, naming Charles as the intended recipient of a revised will, cutting out Evelyn entirely, and leaving the bulk to the nephew who shows true promise. The paper was creased, as though read and refolded many times in private. Ambition had not merely lurked. It had directed the entire performance. The drawing room fire still glowed faintly when Poirot gathered the principals once more. The air was cooler now, carrying the clean bite of night sea air through open portholes. Fresh lilies had wilted slightly in their vases, their heavy perfume turning cloying. Crystal chandeliers tinkled overhead with each gentle roll of the yacht. In quiet reflection, Poirot considered the nature of hidden motives, approximately 290 words. Every crime has its backstage, and where the real motives wait out of the spotlight. Humans conceal them for the simplest of reasons: fear of judgment, fear of loss, fear of self. Greed performs as business acumen. Love twists into possession. Resentment dresses as loyalty. In this case, observe how each mask served a deeper purpose. Lady Evelyn hid relief behind grief, because society expects widows to mourn. Victor masked passion as friendship, because open adultery would destroy his position. Charles played the fool because cunning is safest when underestimated. We all maintain these secret compartments because raw motive, naked, unadorned, is too ugly for the public stage. I recall the Death on the Nile affair, where a woman performed devoted friendship toward her rival while secretly planning her destruction. She smiled, she comforted, and she wept at the right moments, yet her eyes followed every movement like a predator tracking prey. The mask was flawless until jealousy made her overreach. A single unguarded glance toward the murder weapon betrayed her. Psychology teaches us this. The more elaborate the performance, the greater the strain. Motive festers in darkness. When finally exposed to light, it withers or explodes. The universal truth is inescapable. No curtain stays drawn forever. Sooner or later, someone pulls the cord. And when the backstage is revealed, we see not monsters, but ordinary people who believed their secrets could be rehearsed into safety. Theatrical wisdom. For you, careful observer. Never trust the surface performance alone. Look always for what is hidden just behind the curtain. There you will find the motive waiting, patient, silent, and deadly. The Poirot closed the ledger with a soft snap. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times in the distance, slow and final. Rain had begun again, tapping gently on the glass, like fingers requesting entrance. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The final act night had fallen completely over Monaco Harbor. The superyacht La Sirène glowed under strings of deck lights, like a stage set for the grand finale. The main salon had been cleared, velvet curtains drawn across the windows to shut out the glittering lights of the principality. A long mahogany table stood center stage, surrounded by high-backed chairs. Every suspect, every player, had been summoned. The air was cool, scented with fading lilies, wood smoke from the dying fire, and the faint metallic tang of nervous sweat. A crystal chandeliers tinkled softly overhead with each gentle roll of the yacht. The grandfather clock in the corner struck 9, slow and solemn, signaling the beginning of the last scene. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table, small and immaculate, green eyes gleaming under the soft light. He drew himself up to his full height, still modest, and spread his small hands in an expressive theatrical gesture. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice calm, yet carrying to every corner of the room. You have each performed for Hercule Poirot, some with truth, some with considerable artistry. The time has come to review the performances. Let the final act begin. He turned first to Lady Evelyn Harrington. You, madam, played the grieving widow with exquisite precision, the dry-eyed sorrow, the trembling lip, on the perfectly timed handkerchief. A masterpiece of restraint. But grief performed is not grief, felt. Your sleeping draught remained untouched that night because you wished to stay awake, to watch the curtain fall on a husband who had become a burden. The letters from Victor Langford, hidden in your jewel case, speak of a new life planned after Reginald's convenient death. Relief, madam, not sorrow. That was your true role. Evelyn's gloved hands clenched once on the table edge. No denial came, only the soft rustle of silk as she straightened her spine. Poirot moved to Victor Langford. You, monsieur, performed the loyal business partner. The steady cigar, the rough tweed, the voice of dependable strength. Yet loyalty does not falsify alibis. Your cigar ash was found near the master cabin corridor at the very hour you claimed to be reading reports in the smoking lounge. And those passionate letters to Lady Evelyn, written while you smiled at Reginald across boardroom tables, revealed the true script: love performing as friendship, murder planned as business necessity. Victor's cigar had gone out between his fingers. He stared at the ash, as though it had betrayed him. Next, Isabella Rossi. You played the tragic mistress, passionate, wounded, ultimately broken. Your tears in the final confrontation were genuine, mademoiselle, but they came too late. You administered the first dose of digitalis. Yes, driven by jealousy, when Reginald refused to leave his wife. Yet you were only the opening act. The fatal measure was added later, by another hand. Your role was useful, but not starring. Isabella bowed her head, tears falling silently onto the polished table. Poirot turned to Captain Marcus Thorne. The dutiful commander, rigid posture, leather-bound logbook, impeccable entries. Yet duty does not include altering records after the fact, nor accepting secret payments to ignore illicit cargo. You knew of the smuggling, you enabled it, and on the night of the murder, you delayed your rounds just long enough for the poison to be delivered. A small betrayal, perhaps, but betrayal nonetheless. Thorne's shoulders sagged. The logbook lay open before him, like an accusation. Dr. Eleanor Voss sat very still. You performed helpfulness to perfection, doctor. The calm diagnosis, the reassuring tone. Yet helpfulness masked complicity. The digitalis vial in your kit, resealed, ad label smudged, was no accident. You supplied the means, knowing full well it could kill in excess. Fear of exposure, or perhaps a share of the profits, kept your lips sealed. But silence, too, is a performance. Voss closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they were dry but defeated. Finally, Poirot faced Charles Harrington. And now we come to our leading performer. Charles attempted one last half smile. It died before it reached his eyes. You, monsieur, gave the most convincing performance of all. The careless nephew, the harmless fool, laughing at suspicion, lounging in doorways, making clumsy jests. Magnifique, no one suspects the idiot. Yet you made one fatal error. One small moment when the mask slipped completely. Poirot stepped closer. When Isabella confessed her part, you poured yourself champagne. Calmly, and steadily, without a tremor. A man truly shocked by murder would have spilled a drop, hesitated, shaken. Your hands remained rock steady because you already knew. You waited for her quarrel to provide cover, then added the lethal extra dose yourself, securing the entire fortune when the revised will took effect. Stupidity was your costume. Cunning was your true face. Ambition directed every scene. Charles's chair scraped back as he half rose. You can't prove. Poirot raised one small hand. The body betrays, monsieur. Steady hands when they should tremble. A foot that taps beneath the table when innocence would be still. The little grey cells, they see what the performance tries to hide. Silence fell, thick and final. Poirot made one slow turn, regarding each face in turn. The theatre of crime has one truth. Every actor eventually forgets their lines. You have all performed admirably, until the spotlight of truth found you. He paused, letting the words settle. The performance is over. The curtain falls. The truth, she takes her bow. No one applauded. No one moved. The crystal chandeliers tinkled once more as the yacht rocked gently. The fire crackled its last. Outside, rain began again, soft, steady, like the sound of a house emptying after the show. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The salon lights had been dimmed to half strength. Only the deck lanterns outside and the low glow of the dying fire illuminated the faces around the long mahogany table. The air felt colder now, carrying the clean salt of the harbor through open portholes, mingling with the fading perfume of wilted lilies and the last wisps of wood smoke. Crystal chandeliers hung still, no longer tinkling. Even the grandfather clock seemed to hold its breath between chimes. The performance was finished. What remained was aftermath, raw, quiet, and final. Police officers in dark uniforms entered from the corridor. Their footsteps on the parquet were deliberate, unhurried. Handcuffs clicked open with small metallic sounds that cut through the silence like the last notes of an orchestra. Charles Harrington was the first to be approached. He sat motionless, the easy half-smile long gone, replaced by a blank, almost childlike bewilderment. When the officer touched his shoulder, he rose without resistance. The rough metal cuffs closed around his wrists. The kid gloves he had worn earlier lay discarded on the table like shed skin. Charles Harrington, the senior inspector, read in a flat voice, "You are under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Harrington." No dramatic protest. No final theatrical flourish. Only the soft scrape of chair legs and the faint rustle of silk as the others shifted uncomfortably. Charles's eyes flicked once toward Lady Evelyn. Accusation, betrayal, fear all mingling in that single glance before he was led away. The door closed behind him with a soft, definitive click. Lady Evelyn remained seated longest. Her posture, so rigidly elegant throughout the investigation, began to sag. The Chanel cloud that had once announced her presence now seemed thin and tired. She stared at her gloved hands, as though they belonged to someone else. When two officers approached, she did not rise immediately. Instead, she removed the gloves, slowly, finger by finger, and placed them neatly on the table, beside her untouched coffee cup. Only then did she stand. I assisted, she said quietly. The first voluntary admission since the revelation. I knew what Charles intended. I did not stop him. Her voice cracked on the last word. Not rehearsed this time, but genuine. The dry-eyed widow had finally produced tears. They slid silently down her powdered cheeks and fell onto the polished wood. The inspector nodded once. Cuffs were not immediately applied. Instead, she was allowed to walk between the officers, head high for a few steps, before it bowed again. The silk of her gown whispered against the floor like a final curtain dragging across the stage. Victor Langford stood next. He had crushed his dead cigar into an ashtray so violently that tobacco scattered across the table. When the officers moved toward him, he raised both hands in a gesture of surrender. I planned nothing, he said hoarsely. I only loved her. I covered what I could. His rough tweed jacket hung loose now, shoulders rounded. No more bluff loyalty. The mask of the dependable partner had been stripped away, leaving only a middle-aged man facing ruin. Captain Thorne required no prompting. He rose, placed his leather-bound logbook in the center of the table like an offering, and extended his wrists. I altered the records, he said simply. I took the money. I looked away. His voice was flat, almost relieved. The rigid commander had become an ordinary man awaiting judgment, and the cuffs closed with the same small click that had sounded for Charles. He did not look back as he was led out. Dr. Eleanor Voss was the last. She sat with her medical bag at her feet, hands folded in her lap. When the inspector spoke the formal words, she nodded once. I supplied the digitalis, she said. I suspected the dosage would be exceeded. I did not warn him. No excuses, no tears. Only a quiet, professional acceptance of consequences. She stood, smoothed her skirt with automatic precision, and allowed the cuffs to be fastened. As she passed Poirot, she paused for half a second. I thought myself above such weakness, she murmured. I was wrong. Poirot inclined his head. The little grey cells are never wrong, Doctor. Only the human heart misleads itself. One by one, the players exited the salon. The footsteps faded along the corridor. Doors opened and closed, softly now, without drama. The yacht seemed suddenly larger, emptier. Rain pattered against the windows again, a gentle, steady rhythm, like subdued applause after a long and troubling performance. Poirot remained standing at the head of the table. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, then smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. The fire gave one last crackle and subsided into embers. Outside, harbor lights reflected on black water like scattered jewels. The scent of salt and dying roses filled the room. Isabella Rossi had not been arrested. She sat alone now, head bowed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her confession had been partial, driven by passion, not calculation. And the fatal dose had not been hers. She would face questioning, perhaps charges of attempted harm, but not murder. For the first time since the body was discovered, she looked small, fragile, human. Poirot approached her quietly. You will find a way forward, mademoiselle, he said gently. Truth, once spoken, begins its own healing. She lifted her head. Tears had left tracks through her makeup, but her eyes were clearer than they had been in days. She nodded once, small, grateful, and rose to leave under police escort, not in cuffs, but accompanied. The salon was empty now, except for Poirot and the two remaining inspectors. One of them cleared his throat. "Efficient work, Monsieur Poirot. We'll take statements from the crew and seal the yacht until morning." Poirot inclined his head. Order and method have prevailed, and the curtain has fallen. He walked slowly to the open porthole and looked out at the dark harbor. The rain had eased to a fine mist. Somewhere distant, a ship's horn sounded, low, mournful, like the last note of an overture. No applause echoed through the empty salon, no curtain calls. Only justice, quiet, inexorable, and complete. No applause for this performance. Only justice. Chapter 9. After the show dawn broke over Monaco harbor with a pale, hesitant light. The superyacht La Sirène no longer glittered. She lay quiet at her mooring, decks empty, flags at half-mast. The harbor smelled of salt, diesel, and the faint, fishy undertone of morning activity on shore. Gone were the heavy perfumes of Chanel and lilies. Only the clean sea air moved through open portholes now. The yacht's engines were silent. The theater had emptied. The police launches came and went, carrying away the last of the principals under escort. Charles Harrington was taken first, wrists cuffed, head bowed, the mask of the careless nephew stripped away completely. He did not speak as he was helped aboard the launch. His tweed jacket hung loose on shoulders that seemed narrower in the morning light. The revised will, discovered in his trunk, had already been entered as evidence. The fortune he had schemed to claim would never reach his hands. Lady Evelyn followed soon after. She walked slowly between two officers, no longer wearing kid gloves or the elegant poise of the grieving widow. Her silk gown looked out of place in daylight, creased and tired. She paused at the gangway, looked back once at the yacht that had been both prison and stage for so many years, and then stepped aboard the launch without a word. Tears had dried on her cheeks overnight. What remained was quiet resignation. A loveless marriage had ended in violence. Now justice would decide the remainder of her days. Victor Langford was led out next. His rough tweed was rumpled, cigar case empty in his pocket. He had confessed to covering the altered log entries and to knowing, though not directing, the plan. Loyalty had twisted into complicity, partnership into conspiracy. As the cuffs closed, he muttered only one sentence. "I thought love would be enough." The launch carried him away towards the waiting cells. Captain Marcus Thorne maintained his military bearing to the last. He saluted the yacht's flag as he passed, a small automatic gesture. The leather-bound logbook, now evidence, had been removed from the table hours earlier. His role as dutiful commander was over. What remained was a man who had traded honor for payments and silence. He boarded the launch without looking back. Dr. Eleanor Voss walked with quiet dignity. Her medical bag had been confiscated. Her crisp linen had been replaced by a simple coat provided by the police. She had admitted supplying the digitalis and failing to intervene when suspicion arose. "I told myself it was only medicine," she said once more as she stepped onto the launch. Her face was calm, almost relieved, the performance of helpful physician finally discarded. Isabella Rossi was the last to leave. No cuffs restrained her wrists. Her confession had been passionate but incomplete. She had administered a non-lethal dose in rage, never intending death. The fatal measure had been Charles's alone. She would face lesser charges, attempted harm, perhaps conspiracy, but the courts would decide. For now, she was free to go, though shadowed by detectives. She paused at the gangway, looked up at the empty salon windows, then descended to the waiting taxi on shore. Her silk gown caught the morning breeze. For the first time, she looked young, fragile, and unmasked. The yacht was sealed. Crew members gave brief statements, then dispersed. Poirot remained aboard a little longer, walking the now silent decks. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, then arranged a few scattered coffee cups into perfect symmetry on a side table. The fire in the salon had gone out completely. Only cold ashes remained. He stepped onto the gangway last, pausing to look back at La Sirène one final time. The floating stage had played its tragedy. Now it would rest. In quiet reflection, Poirot applied the director method once more, this time to the entire aftermath. The performance. Charles weeps in custody. Lady Evelyn withdraws into silence. Victor mutters of lost love. Each shows regret, remorse, the proper posture of the court. The tell, yet observe. The tears are few, the apologies rehearsed, the eyes still calculating futures rather than mourning pasts. Genuine remorse shakes the whole frame. Performed remorse is selective. The psychology. I recall the aftermath of the ABC murders, where the captured killer maintained composure until the very end, then broke only when confronted with his own vanity. Group guilt diffuses responsibility. Each believes their part was small, excusable. But when the masks are gone, the individual soul faces the mirror alone. Charles planned murder for inheritance. Evelyn permitted it for freedom. Victor aided for passion. Each believed their motive justified the act. Yet psychology reveals the truth. No motive excuses blood. The body may feign sorrow, but the little grey cells remember the steady hands that poured poison. You see it now, no? The performance of regret is the final costume, and the easiest to see through. The harbour grew busy with morning traffic. Fishing boats chugged past. A yacht tender carried supplies to neighbouring vessels. Poirot descended to the quay, where a waiting car would take him to the station. The air felt lighter, cleaner. No more heavy perfumes. No more cloying lilies. Only salt, sunlight, and the distant cry of gulls. Transformations had come to all. Charles, once the cunning fool, now faced a lifetime behind bars, and his ambition shattered. Isabella, once the tragic mistress, might rebuild, chastened by love turned poisonous. Lady Evelyn, widow and conspirator, would live out her days stripped of wealth and pretense. Victor, Thorne, Voss, each had traded position for prison, their roles reduced to defendant. The theatre had emptied, the stage lights were off. The audience, society, justice, truth, had gone home. Yet lessons lingered, masks fall, motives are exposed. And the human heart, for all its performances, cannot hide forever. The theatre emptied, but the lessons lingered. Chapter 10, Poirot reviews the performance. The Orient Express had left Monaco behind hours ago. Now it glided smoothly through the French countryside, the late winter sun slanting low across snow-dusted fields. Inside Poirot's private compartment, the atmosphere was warm and ordered. A small silver tray held a steaming pot of tisane, the herbal scent mingling with the faint aroma of furniture wax from the polished walnut paneling. Velvet curtains had been drawn halfway, softening the light. A single fresh rose, brought aboard at the last station, stood in a crystal vase, its perfume gentle rather than overpowering. The rhythmic clack of wheels on rails provided a soothing counterpoint to silence. Hercule Poirot sat in the deep armchair, small hands folded neatly, green eyes half closed in reflection. A morning newspaper lay open on the table beside him, headlines already confirming what he had known on the yacht's salon floor. Charles Harrington charged with murder, Lady Evelyn and Victor Langford as accessories, Captain Thorne and Dr. Voss facing conspiracy and obstruction counts. Isabella Rossi had been released on bail, her lesser role acknowledged. Sentences would come later, but the curtain had fallen decisively. He sipped the tisane, hot, comforting, and allowed his mind to replay the entire production. Why do humans perform rather than simply reveal truth? The question had followed Poirot through every case, and this one on La Sirène was no exception. Society is a vast theatre. Every role carries expectations. Wealth demands composure. Marriage demands loyalty. Youth demands innocence, even when the heart knows otherwise. Charles Harrington wore the mask of the foolish nephew because cunning is safest when underestimated. Lady Evelyn performed grief because a widow who rejoices invites scandal. Victor Langford played loyal friend while burning letters of passion in secret. Each believed the costume necessary for survival in polite circles. Yet masks are heavy. They tire the wearer. Eventually, the body rebels. A steady hand when it should tremble, dry eyes when tears are expected, a foot tapping anxiously beneath the table. Guilt always betrays the actor. It cannot rehearse perfectly. In the quiet moments, when no audience watches, the truth leaks through. Charles poured champagne without a tremor after Isabella's confession because he already knew the outcome. Lady Evelyn's handkerchief never grew damp because relief, not sorrow, filled her. These are not accidents. They are the body's honest confession when the mind insists on lying. I am reminded of a case many years ago, the ABC murders. There a man performed madness so convincingly. Random killings, alphabet letters, theatrical clues scattered like stage props. He believed himself untouchable behind the mask of the lunatic. Yet psychology unraveled him. The killings were too neat, too patterned. Genuine madness does not follow such tidy order. One small error, the timing of a letter, the choice of victim, revealed calculation beneath chaos. In Monaco, too, the performance was elaborate. Digitalis mimicking natural death, alibis interlocking like scenery, grief rehearsed to perfection. But one steady hand, one untouched sleeping draught, one smudged vial label. The little grey cells noticed. Order and method prevail because deception is exhausting. Truth requires no effort. The psychology of revelation is simple yet profound. When the spotlight of truth shines, the actor has nowhere left to hide. The body, long suppressed, speaks at last. Tremors appear. Voices crack. Eyes dart where they should not. In that moment, the mask falls, not because Poirot forces it, but because the performance has run its course. Humans can lie to others, even to themselves for a time. But the little grey cells, they remember. They wait. And when fatigue sets in, truth takes the stage uninvited. In this Superyacht drama, confined spaces accelerated the unraveling. No one could escape the audience of suspicion. Every glance, every pause, every too perfect line was observed. The floating stage amplified every slip. On land, one might flee to another city, another role. At sea, there is only the yacht and Hercule Poirot. Society demands these performances because raw truth is often ugly. Greed, jealousy, fear of poverty, hatred masked as love. Yet truth ultimately triumphs. Why? Because performance is finite. No, honesty is infinite. The actor tires, forgets lines, stumbles. Truth simply is. It needs no rehearsal. It waits patiently behind every curtain until the curtain is torn away. Poirot set down the Tisane cup with precision, aligning it exactly with the saucer's edge. He touched his magnificent moustache once, thoughtfully, then smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. Outside the window, the landscape blurred past fields, villages, distant mountains, all part of a larger, quieter drama. The lessons of La Sirène would linger long after the headlines faded. Charles would face decades behind bars, his ambition reduced to regret. Lady Evelyn would live out her days in diminished circumstances, the fortune she coveted forever tainted. Victor would lose both love and reputation. Isabella might rebuild, scarred but wiser. A thorn and Voss would carry the stain of broken oaths, and the world would move on, new actors taking old roles, new masks donned in drawing rooms and boardrooms everywhere. Yet some would remember. Some would watch more carefully. Some would question the too perfect tear, the too steady hand, the too smooth alibi. Poirot leaned back, eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. Until the next theater of crime, mes amis, Poirot will be watching.